Buenos días todos. I am going to be speaking in English. Now? Yeah, okay. Buenos días todos. I will be speaking in English, so if you need a translation device, they're out in the hall. I was asked to talk about cases of success in sustainable tourism, and I'll do my best in terms of promoting sustainable tourism. But I think there's a bigger question here, and I was pleased to see it was referred to earlier today. A brief mention on who I am. I worked for National Geographic for over 30 years and inaugurated something we called the Destination Stewardship Center there. That work continues under the similar name, which you see here, and you're invited to go take a look and participate if you'd like to. The platform is open to all of you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about sustainability, and as I say, I was pleased to see some of these matters were raised earlier. Obviously, climate change is becoming more and more of a problem, and the first order of sustainability, and this is what you hear most often, is what I call planetary issues: greenhouse gases, waste disposal in the ocean, and so on and so forth. This is essential. It is not a differentiator. It's not going to make any difference what destination you're in. This has to occur. And some of you may know that back in medieval days in Europe, the common way to get rid of the garbage and the bedpans from the bedroom was to throw them out in the street. And that was accompanied by the cry, "Gardy Lou, look out, here it comes." We don't do that anymore. And now, with 7 billion people, Earth is the street that we live on, and we have to stop thinking in terms of Gardy Lou for the oceans and the atmosphere. This is no longer an option. It is no longer an addition. It's as essential as not throwing the trash in the street. Now, we're almost beginning to forget, because of these important planetary issues, the importance of preserving local habitats and nature. We're going to hear a lot about nature later today, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, other to show that it's really important for ecotourism appeal, and it pays. Nature tourism is still growing. And there was a study done a few years ago in the United States on the percent of Americans who enjoy bird watching as part of their trips. And the people who enjoyed it the most also tended to be the most affluent. It's a good tourist market. So from a purely financial point of view, this is a good idea. It's a good idea from an ecological point of view as well. That's 46 million potential tourists interested in birds, at least for part of their trip. And preserving nature preserves beauty. This is a picture of the Sierra Gorda. You'll see several more from the project that we did there last year. And a couple of young women that I met were in from Washington, D.C., where I'm from, and said it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Those mountains are covered with forest. That's one reason it looks so great. That's not all there is, though. There's much more to sustainability in the broad sense. And from a tourism point of view, these can all be good economic investments. History is important to preserve. Built heritage, it's called. Whether it's traditional architecture, archaeological sites, and an old building that's repurposed as a hotel is more likely to get on the cover of a travel magazine. Probably not some of those hotels you see in Cancun, because they're not different, they're not interesting. And this is a great way, by the way, to repurpose any historic building. This is a boutique hotel in Quito, Ecuador. It's been very successful, and you can charge a fair amount of money for this sort of boutique hotel. It pays to sustain the scenery. I was so glad to see aesthetics being mentioned earlier on. It's a part of sustainability that everybody ignores, and yet what do tourists do when they go to a place? They take pictures of it. So it's important that it looked nice. Here's a picture from my visit to Chiapas a few years ago. I love Chiapas, but you could just as easily see a scene like this. And I could do this comparison in any state or any country in the world because beauty is at risk all over the world. In every country. I'm the only tourist who photographs scenes like this. But nobody would cross an ocean or a continent to visit places that look like this. So it's important to keep beauty going. I guess this is beauty of a sort, but that's what greeted me the last time I was in Cancun. If you don't know what Hooters means in English, see me afterwards. And people and culture, of course, the most important things. Chiapas again, from various points around Mexico, and these are the differentiators, because every one of these can be different for a different destination. And protecting these is key to true sustainability. And local benefit, very important. These ladies in Brazil are making money from making baskets for a nearby resort, but they missed an opportunity. The ladies aren't at the resort to talk about their baskets, and that could have added a lot of depth to what's going on in this part of Bahia in Brazil. And increasingly important, the issue of tourism management is now part of sustainability. Badly managed tourism, we are seeing all over the world. World Heritage is particularly at risk because mass tourism tends to happen there. It's certainly happening in parts of Mexico. I haven't seen this in Tulum, but maybe it's going on. I hope not. You've seen pictures like this, but it's important to remember there are also pictures like this. Bienvenidos, amigos turistas. That's in the Peruvian Amazon. So this is the good side of what tourism can do. These ecotourists are helping bring school supplies to local villages along the rivers there. So it's important to take a holistic approach to what sustainability is in terms of the destination. And we introduced the concept through National Geographic quite some time ago. We called it geotourism. You can also call it genuine tourism, or whatever you want. I've got this definition in Spanish, and that is essential. And I still stick by this definition, no matter what the name. This is a holistic approach. And by the way, it includes geology too, if you're interested in geoparks. That's part of it as well. So it gained a lot of attention, particularly when the Geographic was active. And this, to me, was the best of all in 2013. The OEA announced that it was the preferred method of tourism for Latin America and the Caribbean. So, yay. Promotional messages now. The basic thing is you got to be sustainable if you're going to promote what you're doing that's sustainable. I don't think you have to be totally sustainable. That's almost impossible. But you've got to be doing things that are really credible. Now, I did a little collecting about messages just online from promotional campaigns and whatnot for this talk. I didn't have a lot of time to do it, but here's what I found. Some messages explicitly say, we're sustainable, we're green, we're doing something right. And here's a few of those. State of Oregon, sustainable travel, Oregon is green, and we're not just talking about the trees. Norway has done a lot to cultivate an image of sustainability. They came in very high on the destination stewardship surveys that we conducted at National Geographic. Green travel. Costa Rica, of course, has long been known as a champion of things green. And notice that's Essential Costa Rica, my choice, naturally. Alpine Europe, this is a fairly new group, the Alpine Pearls. And these are a series of towns in 6 different countries in Europe that have the Alps, from France to Slovenia. And they stress green travel as what they're doing sustainably. That doesn't mean the whole destination is a perfect example of sustainability. I just heard from someone who was in Interlaken in Switzerland, and they said it was drowning in tourists, too many people there, but at least they had electric cars. So there's more work to do in Interlaken. Slovenia has really become the rising star of sustainable travel. And it's partly because they're really doing it. When I visited Ljubljana the last time, I hadn't been there in 8 years. And I get pretty tired of visiting places I haven't seen for a long time, and I'm old enough to have this happen frequently, and being disappointed. It's not the way it was before. When I went to Ljubljana, it was better than it was before in so many ways, and it was pretty good before. And that's just the capital city. The whole little country is trying to do this. They've got an excellent green certification program, and it's getting recognized by the media as such. And this is an opportunity to think about. Mexico is too big a country to do this, but states in Mexico could do this. And they can each do it in their own way, because it's not just throwing out the trash, it's sustaining what's special about your particular state, or part of the state. Sierra Gorda in Querétaro is a good stewardship model. And we were there last year to do some videos on it, and I'm going to try to show you just the trailer for this. We have no audio, but pretend there's pretty music in the background, and we'll see if this works. And you can find it on YouTube. We're calling it World's Inspiring Places, and so far Sierra Gorda is the first. And let's see if this works. Yes, it is. He says, welcome to the world's inspiring places. And then there's a lot of nice music. Now that's just a 30-second trailer to give you an idea, but there's a 4-minute and a 12-minute version of the documentary that we did there. And I hope you take a look at it. It might give you an idea. And then other messages don't stress sustainability explicitly, but they kind of imply that we're doing a good job. Inspired by Iceland is a campaign that's won awards in the sustainability circles. Iceland does a reasonably good job. They're having an over-tourism problem, like so many other things. But you'll notice that they're just showing some of what's special about Iceland. This is just a fragment of it. And by showing that, you kind of get the idea that maybe they're taking good care of it. Pure has caught on. In English, the word pure suggests both that the destination has no pollution and 100% authenticity. So pure Grenada, and this works even if it doesn't have those things. New Zealand, been pure since 2011, and New Zealand, of course, also has an excellent reputation, and they too are fighting over tourism right now in parts of the country. The state of Michigan in the United States also picked up pure, and they're applying it in various ways, including cities, to have an authentic city experience in a big city in Michigan. I think there's enough pure out there that I don't think you should do the same thing. But this is an important piece of advice from one of the tourism people in Michigan. And I'll read it for the translators. The potential problem with having such a phenomenal brand as Pure Michigan is if a first-time visitor sees one of the ads and decides to come to Michigan, we have to deliver an exceptional experience that meets or exceeds the expectations set by that advertisement. It's got to be real. Jordan is looking at it in a somewhat different way. They've created the Meaningful Travel Map, which takes you to different communities in Jordan with social enterprises, so that you know you're doing something that's benefiting local people. Clever idea. Now, the other way we can promote is by reaching out to the media. And again, you got to really be sustainable. And it's essential for credibility, and it's essential for the future of the destination. And in some cases, the media will find you. I just got to visit the Faroe Islands. They're southeast of Iceland, if you don't know, connected with Denmark. And in our surveys, we found they got the highest rating by the experts of 111 different island groups. They didn't ask for that, we just discovered it. And that was 10 years ago, and I must say from what I saw last month, they're still doing a pretty good job. And they have incorporated that finding, of course, but they don't make a big noise about it, just, yeah, National Geographic liked us. So telling the sustainable travel story for the media can be a challenge because sometimes the media doesn't care. if it's boring. You know, our hotel recycles. Good for you. So do thousands of hotels. That's not a story. So why don't the media pay attention? Well, having been in the media myself, one problem is we get swamped with public relations pleas that are completely crazy. That was my inbox at one point, 33,000 emails. We don't have time to read all that. And so there has to be a better way to connect, and usually that's through word of mouth or someone who knows the editor. And then you need to adjust the message for the audience. We were a travel magazine. For a while we kept getting promotion for Swedish novels written in Swedish. And we're an English language travel magazine. I don't know who thought that up. So here's a way to think about that. For the same topic, in this case water quality in Alaska's Inside Passage, for an environmentalist, how we're keeping it clean. That's what they'd be interested in. For the tourism industry, we're protecting the product, which is the place. That's the ultimate product. And for the travelers, discover a best-kept secret. By the way, that's a great message often. Secrets, real places, the real word. Travelers like to hear that sort of thing. And often the best thing is to stress what's fun about the place and weave into that, but there's also a conservation message. This is a spectacular scene, and you can take a zip line from that treehouse in Laos, but it is part of a travel program to protect the gibbons, the monkeys in that area. And you can also buy the story by just paying for sponsored content, it's called. That's different from an ad. It's sort of editorial content, but you're sponsoring it. And that's been done quite frequently with travel. And now we have social media and Instagram. Instagram is in a way becoming maybe more important than any of these travel media, as you probably know, because everything is going on there. I just dived in and looked at Guanajuato for 30 seconds this morning. And hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and some of them are excellent. But this is going to be the feedback of the future because, as we know from much research, people decide where they're going to go based on word of mouth, and social media is word of mouth amplified. And travelers themselves can tell some of the stories. This couple is sleeping in an actual Tarahumara cave and they're paying $300 a night. But it was a special event connected with the boutique resort that was there at the time. So less is more. And they have a story to tell. And it doesn't cost a lot of money if it's a good story. At least it doesn't cost you a lot of money. And another thing to look at is hotels that think outside the box. And the box is the wall of the hotel. And the ones that realize that they are the host for the place. That's something to encourage. We had a series of programs with Intercontinental Hotels a few years ago, and they ran a contest for Responsible Business Week, which made me wonder what the other 51 weeks were. But it was a good idea. It got people thinking the right way. And they found some hotels that thought outside the box. This was one in Cozumel. What they're doing to help protect the reef, not just make the pillows softer. Here's some other examples. In Vietnam, a hotel was helping maintain a temple. In Fiji, helping with the marine life in the lagoon. In Romania, helping with a cultural museum. And these are things worth bragging about, and they make a connection between the hotel and the place upon which it depends. Another way to get press, of course, is to apply for an award. Here's one in Palawan, in the Philippines, that did that. Tourism for Tomorrow. Certification is another way to go about this. There are some pros and cons to certification. Here in the state of Wisconsin, they have a green travel program. And you're familiar with some of these programs. Costa Rica's CST. For a while there was a problem there since none of the large resorts could pass the CST requirements. I understand that's now getting better. Iceland is using the vacuum quality, which they developed from New Zealand's Qualmark quality. And this is branding plus sustainability. In all of these cases, it's not only what's unique to our place, but it also has an environmental component and an ethical component, and I think this is a good trend. And as mentioned before, golf courses can also be sustainable. It's possible to have an eco-friendly golf course if you really feel you have to have a golf course. By the way, more Americans travel to watch birds than to play golf. Something to think about. And telling the stories is what really makes it come alive. That's what people pay attention to, as we've seen. And it's often best when it's local people telling it. I think good tour guides are a great resource to look for. And the good ones tell excellent stories, and the really good ones keep them truthful. This fellow in Newfoundland has got a bunch of tourists held enthralled watching a man clean a fish, because he's such a great storyteller that they remember everything he's talking about. That's a resource. So true sustainability in tourism, I would say, is first of all, make sure the touring is responsible. If you go into a place with all these cormorants, you're going to scare them. If that happens once or twice a day, probably no big deal. If it happens every 20 minutes, it's a big deal. And that sort of problem is, of course, existing everywhere. Who do we want? We don't have a problem of shortage of tourists anymore. So it's possible to pick and choose. Who are the sorts of people we want to come? How long do we want them to come for? Can we provide incentives for them to stay longer and disincentives to come in for 2 hours and then disappear again? We did this study of the geotourism market in the U.S. quite some time ago. I won't get into the details now. But the good news was these were people that fit that mold. These are the sorts of people that are actually interested in the place, not just in drinking beer on the beach, although I like to drink beer on the beach myself sometimes, but I'm interested in what goes on in the hinterland as well. We'll get copies of this for you. And we were pleased to find that the people visiting Montana, and this was key to our study, actually do spend more than the people that are not interested in the place. So that was good news. We've had reference before to quantity versus quality, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's worth a little bit of time. You don't want to become known as a tourist trap, the place that's full of tourists and no locals. This, of course, is one of the big problems with over-tourism. It's a big problem in Europe. And it's worth looking at some of the arithmetic here. You can make the same amount of money from 500 tourists as from 10,000 tourists, theoretically. And I made up those figures, but here's some real figures from Jamaica. They have about 1.5 million cruise ship tourists that stay for less than a day, they don't stay overnight, and over 2 million who stay for roughly a week. And the benefit is 13 times for the overnight tourists. And that's low. When you look at Grenada, it's 42 times. Ireland had an interesting problem. This is the top of the Cliffs of Moher, which is a tourism attraction, and they were getting too many tour buses coming in. And they said, we want to raise the price for tour buses to park here. And County Clare said, no, you can't, because we want more tourists, because we're counting success by numbers of arrivals. This goes on all over the world. I don't know whether it's going on in places in Mexico, but I wouldn't be surprised. And you can Google it online and find, in 1 week, at least 10 destinations around the world talking about how many more arrivals they're going to get. We can't think that way anymore. It's a bad measure. It's not the number of arrivals, it's what people do, what they spend when they get there. So protecting the place is essential. There it is, Spanish. I do have some of these in Spanish. Here's an example of how interconnected protecting a place is. It's not easy. This does not look like a tourism picture. It's a couple of cows grazing above a stream. But when that happens, you get erosion. And when erosion happens, you get waters full of silt. And this is the Agua Azul in Chiapas, and it's not very azul, is it? This kind of thing, again, nothing unique to Chiapas. This happens all over the place. But that's how difficult sustainability is. And what about the farmer? He needs a place to graze the cattle. He needs a solution too. But this kind of erosion, of course, is not only bad for tourism, it's bad for all sorts of other reasons. That's just one of the many challenges we have in taking care of our destinations. And one thing that's important to remember when we're thinking about the numbers is that the destination, excuse me, comes for free. You don't have to pay for the beach, you don't have to pay for the city, you don't have to pay for the mountains, so it doesn't show up on the ledgers. It's what economists call an externality. But it's real, and people won't come there if it doesn't look good. So that's why we need stewardship councils. This is the form of governance that we talked about earlier that we recommend. And we recommend a structure kind of like this, where you've got part government, part business, responsible businesses please, and part civil society with no one of the three in control. At least two of those segments have to agree with each other. Even though the ultimate responsibility may fall to governments, we know that governments have their own issues, so there needs to be a balance in taking care of the place, and it needs to survive and survive changes in government. And all these different aspects should be represented on a council if they're unique to the destination. I won't try to read those all, we don't have time, but you get the idea. The group Destinations International, which used to be DMAI, has now caught on to this, and they've been recommending through Destination Next that community stakeholders should belong to the destination organization, not just hotel owners. Building a sense of place is important. Corporate social responsibility is important. All needs to be folded into this. And the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, which I'm a member of, has this criterion for destinations. I think it's the most important one. And look down there in the yellow. Ambientales, económicas, sociales y culturales, all part of sustainability. I'm always asked for examples of places that are doing this, and we're trying to collect them. There aren't that many good ones yet, but this area in the state of Wyoming, south of Yellowstone National Park, is working on a good program. And I'm interested in the Pueblos Mágicos because I think there's a possibility there for these to really develop into good models for that kind of stewardship council, and then natural areas can begin to do the same thing as needs to happen in Sierra Gorda and so on. Siancán, by the way, of course, is also a good example. So for a place like Bernal, the last magic town I was in, I think it's a good idea, and I think you can look at the Alpine Pearls and say, we can do a better job, and go ahead and do that. So this would be my message: sustain all the great assets of this country, and this country has such wonderful diversity all over, and I don't think it's well recognized yet. Nature, nice places to be, gastronomy, history, artisanry, and friendly people. And you pull all that together, and promotion of sustainability will be easy. Thank you. And now we have time for discussion, and I'll put on my interpretive magic here. Questions, discussion? Or argue with me. Yeah, in English, please.
Hi, I'm sorry. Omar Osorio from Amanecer Sustentable. Excellent presentation, thanks. I would like to ask you about the resilience in front of the hurricane season. For example, today, with the 5 systems in the Atlantic Ocean, and how to protect and react with prevention in order to keep in mind all you have said that is beautiful, but inform it does natural disasters in sustainable thinking.
I'm not quite sure I'm understanding your question yet. Apologies for my bad hearing. But the question was about, can somebody repeat it, please, for me?
No, está todavía.
Resilience.
Resilience and adaptation in front of the hurricane seasons. We are exactly today, in the next days, in front of the top of the hurricane season. How to create resilience for sustainable tourism.
Resilience.
Resilience. Adaptation, preparation. Sí, ¿cómo prepararnos con resiliencia y adaptación? Por ejemplo, hoy mismo en la temporada de huracanes, hoy mismo tenemos 5 sistemas climáticos en el Atlántico y cómo prepararnos para, con sustentabilidad, hacer frente a todo esto, con todo lo que usted ha dicho que ha sido maravilloso.
Well, some of this is an engineering challenge. And I think part of it is an educational challenge. And that applies to both residents and tourists. And I think, you know, I'm going to give an indirect answer because there's a broader issue here. And that is that we need to bring local people into the discussion much more than they usually are. A lot of times local people have no idea how their place is being promoted unless they bother to go look it up. But the residents need to be part of it. Now, what can tourism do about global warming and sea level rise? Well, one thing, of course, is not to contribute to it if possible. But for resilience from hurricanes and whatnot, obviously barrier islands and coral reefs are important. And a particular message I have for any country that gets a lot of tourists from the United States. 1/3 of these people don't believe there is global warming. They're against the environment. This is an educational opportunity for any hotel resort that has a coral reef as part of its attraction. It needs to be done gently and quietly, maybe some information on the back of the menu, but no one of these people should go home without knowing more about what's really going on with the oceans and the sea. I'm not sure if that answers your question satisfactorily, but at least there's part of it. Someone there?
Sí, buen día. Le voy a obsequiar una publicación con un esfuerzo editorial con el tema de la sustentabilidad, con la idea de que hagamos una sinergia entre sus conocimientos de otros países y el de México. Estamos a sus órdenes.
Okay. Okay. The publication is what's Q? TQV. TQV. For a sustainable Mexico without corruption. Okay. Gracias. Next.
Okay, right here. The thing here is probably more planning, answering a little bit or commenting on the question of our that is our mate there. I'll speak in Spanish so everybody understands. Un poco comentando la pregunta del compañero, el asunto de resiliencia tiene que ver mucho con la planeación y con no acabar con las barreras protectoras naturales de las costas en cuanto a los huracanes. Mientras sigamos acabando con los manglares, mientras sigamos acabando con las dunas, pues efectivamente la resiliencia de los destinos va a ser cada vez menor y vamos a ser mucho menos sostenibles. Entonces sí necesitamos pensar mucho más en la cuestión de la protección y la planeación y la recuperación de manglares y de dunas costeras.
I agree, and I think there's a way to make that a little easier to swallow for some of the business people who go, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. Well, you have to afford it. I like the idea of cheating at solitaire. If you cheat at solitaire, eventually a hurricane will wipe you out if you do not have these resources. And mangroves and wetlands are also the nurseries of sea life. And we have enough problem with sea life already without tearing away the environments that our platter of fish depends on. But I think to the extent we can turn this into part of the tourism experience and bring the types of tourists that are responsive to that. And that's a wide spectrum. It's not just hardcore eco-tourists. It's also people who may also like to lie on the beach and drink a beer, but they recycle the beer bottle. And that's the kind of people that will be responsive to this. And there's also ways to enjoy the sea without having a beach. In fact, sitting on a beach by the ocean is a fairly new way of recreating in human history. It kind of didn't get started until about 150 years ago. People didn't want to go next to the beach. So we may need to go back to looking at the sea from a slight distance.
Ok, vamos a dar paso a la última pregunta. Les recordamos que estamos un poquito atrasados. Después de esta pregunta, en 5 minutos damos inicio a la siguiente sesión. No desocupen sus lugares porque están muy peleados. Adelante.
Hola, buenos días. Soy María Elena Martínez, de Conservación del Territorio Insular Mexicano y en términos de Baja California Sur. En términos de lo que decía usted, de integrar precisamente el desarrollo sustentable, pero desde la perspectiva económica, social, ambiental, de los servicios ambientales. Entonces, es un proceso complejo sin duda, pero creo que la infraestructura turística, el gran turismo, tiene una gran oportunidad de frente, porque finalmente la perspectiva del turismo internacional, de los nuevos jóvenes que buscan retos, buscan productos turísticos que los enlacen, como bien mencionabas, que les cuenten una historia que se van a llevar y van a traducir en un mejor turismo, en un turismo responsable. Entonces creo que esta filosofía sí tiene que transmitirse y innovar, no solamente en los productos, sino desde el marco jurídico, ¿sí? Y que trascienda en todas sus estructuras administrativas y que llegue finalmente este producto renovado, remasterizado, porque esto requiere de una nueva visión y estructura para que podamos conservar de manera sustentable para nuestras futuras generaciones y que este capital natural finalmente se traduzca en economía y en Producto Interno Bruto. Gracias.
Yeah. I think that one way to begin changing the thinking, and this is a big job, it may take a generation and we are late, but it is essential that we begin to think of the destination as the tourism product. This needs to be woven into every conversation. There's only one type of tourism where that's not true, and that's for totally manufactured products, like Disney World or a shopping mall. And those are the only things we can make more of. Otherwise, The destination, its nature, its culture, its people, that is the tourism product, even if you don't put it in your bookkeeping. And we may need to start thinking about ways to get it into the bookkeeping so that that is done. And that's why governance is so important now, because that will be the way to start doing it. But the place is the ultimate product. And like those hotels I showed, to begin to think that way and help that product stay healthy and get better, that's the way we need to go. Thank you all.
Agradecemos a todos los presentes. No olviden conservar su lugar. En un par de minutos continuamos la siguiente sesión.